Welcome to the Ridge Community Church Online. It's great to be with you no matter where you're joining us today. My name is Lexi and I get to be your host, and that is just so exciting for me because this is actually my first time hosting online. If you're new to the Ridge Online, we are just so glad that you're here. It would be great to get to know you a little bit. Maybe you have some questions we can help answer. Maybe you could use some prayer. Whatever you need to take your next step here at the Ridge, we want to help. The easiest and best way to do that is to fill out a Let's Connect form. It only takes a moment, and after you complete the form, someone from our team will reach out to you to talk to you about what you put on the form. You want to know how you get the form? It's simple. You just scan the QR code that you see on your screen or text the word connect to the number that you see below me. I know for me personally, connecting with others really helped advance my faith journey and open my eyes to new views. So we really hope that you'll do that with us. And while you're doing that, here is how our time is going to go together today. In just a moment, we're going to wrap up this series called 5 Ways to Love Your Neighbor. Over the last few weeks, we have been learning about how we can bring the hope of Jesus into our neighbors' homes. And it's been more than just forcing our faith on others, on being weird or creepy or annoying. Instead, we have been learning how we can genuinely care for our neighbors in some of the same ways God cared for his peers. So today, our online campus pastor Tyler is going to wrap up this series by sharing not just the final way, but perhaps the biggest way we can share our relationship with God with others. But before we hear from Tyler, we're actually going to hear a little bit from our executive pastor Jody. So Jody's going to give us some great insights for those of us who give to the Ridge. She also has some highlights so we can see how our giving is making an impact, and that's just always so encouraging to see. Right now, we're going to join our band and sing with God. Some of us use this time to pray, to reflect on the words of the songs, or to center ourselves. So you do whatever you need to do to prepare yourself for our time together today. Let's do that now, and thank you so much for joining us.
Gathered in your name, calling out to you. Your glory like a fire, awakening desire, will burn our hearts with truth. You're the reason we're here. You're the reason we're singing. In this place, your glory on our face, we're looking to the sky. Descending like a cloud, you're standing with us now. Lord, unveil our eyes. You're the reason we're here. Yeah, you're the reason we're singing. The floodgates, a mighty river flowing from your heart, filling every part of our praise.
Well, today I wanted to talk to you about something that can sometimes be a little bit intimidating or awkward to talk about in church, and that is the topic of money. Now, don't freak out on me, because actually giving and money, it is a sacred thing to God. And, specifically, I want to talk about what happens when you give to God here at the Ridge. You give your offering every week or every month, and then what? What happens? Well, in my role as your executive pastor, I have this huge burden to ensure that how we steward every gift, every monetary gift given to God here is done in a healthy and safe and transparent way. So whether it's like some six-figure gift that's given through a stock donation or 50 cents given by a rich kid or anything in between, you're taking a step in your faith journey to honor God and give faithfully. And we honor God by ensuring that we steward it well. That is why being completely transparent about how we steward that money, it matters to me. And it matters to me that you know how we do it. So the first thing you need to know is who is stewarding these dollars. Well, we have a volunteer finance team made up of, these amazingly gifted people who work in fields that have to do with finance and accounting. And they handle hundreds of millions of dollars for local and global companies every year. And their wisdom is a complete gift to God's vision of bringing the hope of Jesus into more homes. Now, specifically, our job as a team is to ensure that the vision of this church gets funded, and that also that our church maintains its fiscal health. So every few years, this group also works with an outside accounting firm because, again, we want complete transparency. We want every dollar to be accounted for. And once those dollars have all been accounted for, we put them together in a budget every year. It equals about $3 million annually. And this is what those dollars turn into, a lovely pie chart, my favorite thing. I actually want to call out just a few things, again, to give you some context and help you understand how we are stewarding the gifts that you give to God here at the Ridge. So staffing, let's start there, okay? Staffing at 46% is the biggest piece of our pie. It's also the most important in so many ways. And while it is the biggest piece of the pie, actually, this is a little bit light. You can be up to 55% of your budget, that's industry standard for churches, and still be very healthy. And so what this should tell you is this piece of our pie is a little bit light for churches our size. We are going to be adding to our staff team as we prepare to launch our Oak Creek Franklin campus this fall, and we're excited about it. So be praying about whom God might call, either out of these chairs or out of some other city and onto our staff team. We're really excited about that. Okay, the second thing I want to talk about is that facilities piece of the pie. Now, this represents our physical buildings, and this chunk of the budget, it has shrunk dramatically this year. With the sale of the building that we used to own in Oak Creek, our mortgage payment and our debt load has shrunk as well. Now, this has set us up to be really financially healthy as we move into relaunching in a portable way as we go back to Oak Creek and Franklin, but not just for that campus. We're going to be fiscally healthy to continue to launch more campuses after that. Okay, the next chunk I want to call your attention to is the ministries and operations chunk. And this means like all of the ministries or all of the departments that you experience here at the Ridge. It also includes all of our leadership development efforts. And it also includes everything you experience here in services, whether you're in the house right now or if you're watching online, and all of the digital stuff. This is where that chunk comes from. And let me just brag on our staff a little bit, because they are so great at being stewards and stretching every dollar in this small portion of our budget to get the most out of it. But really, this is a little bit light, because this piece of the pie includes vision critical stuff. So as we continue to grow, it's our effort to continue to grow this particular chunk and to empower our staff to do more, to serve you and to serve people who aren't here yet even better. Okay, last but certainly not least, giving or compassion. And I saved this for last for a reason, because this actually is what makes your church the most unique. It is really a special thing for us. We have always been a church that tithes at the Ridge. We want to practice what we preach, and when we ask you to do that, we want to hold ourselves accountable to giving away at least 10% of what's been entrusted to us every year. Now, this covers things like contributions to our compassion partners locally and globally that you hear us talk about. It also covers our efforts toward planting other churches and a ton more. But what you need to know is that this thing in particular, this giving component, is not normal. Most churches do not tithe, and they don't really give away much at all. They consider the work that they do every day to be the work of a tithe. And for them, if they are giving away, it's a smaller percentage. Usually from our research, what we found is 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4% on the high end. And that's okay for them. That's great. What we're wanting to be transparent with you about is we've set a different boundary for ourselves. Again, we want to be upfront with you in how we're stewarding these dollars. So we've decided to express our generosity in this way, believing that when we do, God will continue to bless our efforts here and to bless our church. So when we say to you, we can't give out God, outgive God, this is our effort to, again, show you that we are living that out as well. Okay, so now all of you math folks who know a tithe means 10% are way ahead of me, because that's more than 10% up there, which is the really awesome part about compassion and giving in particular this year. The reason that chunk of our pie is larger is because you all gave so generously during Live Big this year. I mean, you gave more than $250,000. We had no way of dreaming or praying or even thinking that that would be the reality we are sitting in. And so this is just another chance for us to come to you and celebrate that together and to say, yeah, every single one of those dollars has been given away in God's name outside of these walls or that screen that you're watching on. Awesome, awesome job. So just so you know, this pie chart is going to be up at any time you get curious. It'll be on the giving page of our website, and we're going to continue to be transparent with you about how we steward these dollars, either by informing you on our annual report or doing moments like this just a couple of times a year to check in and let you know how your church is doing. If you have any questions and you want to dig deeper, I'm always available. My email's on the website. You can reach out to me personally, and we'll dig in whatever way serves you best. But here's the deal. We want you to feel confident when you give here at the Ridge. We want you to understand that your gifts that you're giving to God are being stewarded in His name to bring the hope of Jesus into homes here and all the way across the world and everywhere in between. And so my hope is you have more of that confidence to continue taking steps in your own generosity journey because of what we've done and what we've talked about together today. And so we're not just going to talk about this sacred step without also practicing it together. And as we move into a time of giving, I just want to encourage you to follow one of the methodologies you're going to see on the screens and give generously, give faithfully. See what God stretches you to do and how He moves your heart in His direction because of it. And after you give, would you just do me a favor? Would you take a moment and say a prayer for all of the people behind the scenes who are doing their best to continue to let God lead and to be faithful in how they steward every single dollar? Let's give together.
Second, what did you think about the ride?
It was great. And apparently, I've never been on live television before, but apparently sometimes I don't watch I don't watch the news because I'm a kid, and apparently Grandpa just gives me the remote after we watch the Powerball.
It's the Powerball.
Tell me about the ride. What did you think about the ride?
Well, it was great.
Why?
Because apparently you're spinning around, and apparently every time you get dizzy,
Yeah.
that's all you do is get dizzy.
Is it fun?
Yeah. And I've never ever been on live television. I never ever be on live
Are you
television.
excited?
Yeah, and apparently I already went down the super slide. When I went down the one, I was scared half to death. I just freak out.
Well, apparently, it's hard to talk about something that you're really excited about and you weren't ready to be asked a question. But hey, we can help with that today. I want to welcome everyone who's joining us online and here in Greenfield. My name is Tyler, and I serve as one of our pastors here. And today we are wrapping up a series that we've been excited to be going through, and that is called 5 Ways to Love Your Neighbor. And what we've been doing is that if you're a follower of Jesus, we've actually been doing one of the biggest and best things that we could do for another person. And that is to love our neighbors, and by neighbors we mean anyone who is near us. We're going to love them in a way that would actually point them towards Jesus, where hopefully they may even make the decision to follow Jesus. Now, the reason why we've been doing this is because someone has actually done this for us. And when we look back at that, I mean, we aren't mad at them for doing that. We are so grateful that they have done that for us. But the challenge for us is this, is we don't want to do this in a way that's like weird or creepy or comes across as forcing our faith on someone or turning someone into a project where we just got to get them to give a prayer. In fact, if you're here with us and if you're not yet a follower of Jesus, you might be like, ooh, I don't want people like forcing their faith on me. We don't want that either. Instead, what we see is that we can actually do this in a way that shows that you matter to us and that you matter to God. And these are the 5 ways that we actually love our neighbors. In fact, we see these 5 ways to do this based off the life of Jesus. And what's really cool about these ways is that when we unpack them, they actually spell a word that we call bless. Now, bless just really means to give God's best to someone else, and that's what it means to love our neighbor. So the blessed practices are these. We started off with the first one. The B is, hey, we're just going to begin with prayer, because when we pray, God moves. He moves inside of us, and he moves in others as well. And then we talked about the L, which is listen. And when we listen to our neighbors, something amazing happens. They feel understood. They feel loved. They feel like they matter just because we took the time to listen to them. And then we do the E, which E is, hey, we just want to eat with them, because something powerful or sacred happens when we share a meal with someone. And then the first S is we're going to take a time to serve them. That when we listen to them and eat with them, we'll find a way that we can actually meet a need and we can serve them and make a difference. And then today we're going to look at the next S as well. Now, what's been really cool about this, and if you're new with us or if you missed any of these previous weeks, I really can't encourage enough. You got to go back and you got to go to our YouTube playlist or subscribe to our podcast if you listen to podcasts and catch up with these, because these really build off each other, and it's really important that we do all of these together to love our neighbors. But what's been really cool is we've gone through this. We've just invited all of us, whether you're online or whether you're in Greenfield, to say, hey, let's commit together to blessing and loving our neighbors throughout the summer. And the reason why we said this summer is because although we can and we should do this throughout the year, there's something magical that happens during the summer in Southeast Wisconsin. And that is we get a few moments of nice weather that causes our neighbors to come outside. And by neighbors, and when I said, I mean anyone near us, so I mean they can be our literal neighbors, maybe it's our co-workers, maybe it's someone that we would deem our one. If you're a follower of Jesus, your one is someone who's close to you, who is not yet following Jesus. Like, they just come out more during this time of year. And so we can really put into practice these things that we've been talking about. And so we said, hey, we want everyone to commit to doing this. And what's been really cool is that we have actually already have had over 340 people commit to blessing their neighbors this summer. They said, I'm in on this thing. And we've been hearing stories already about how this has been working out. In fact, we heard this one story of a guy who would self-describe himself as an introvert. And he would say, I don't really always hang out with people, but he decided, you know what, I'm gonna bless my neighbors. I'm gonna love them by inviting them over to eat with them. And he threw together a spontaneous cookout party in his backyard. And he said all of his neighbors in his neighborhood area just came out to eat there. It was really cool. We had another person in our online Facebook group share with us a story that she said, hey, I'm going to commit to blessing my neighbor. And this neighbor, who's not a follower of Jesus, wanted to talk and then shared a story of just this deep hurt and pain going on in this person's life. And this person listened and helped this person understand that they were there for him. And actually, this person had a similar situation in their life. They were able to demonstrate complete empathy where this person felt really loved and valued because this person went out of their way to bless them. It was really, really cool to read about that. And then for me, I've committed to going through this, and I've had the opportunity to spend time with one of my neighbors throughout the last couple weeks, just several times, almost an hour at a time. And it's almost become this type of mentoring relationship where we're asking questions and listening and understanding and get to know them as we're working to blessing through this. And so we want this for you. We want everyone to experience this and the power that comes when you are blessing your neighbor. And so if you haven't yet committed yet, I want to invite you to do that. And you can do so by pulling out your phone and just texting the word bless to this phone number, 414-509-0339. And when you text bless to this phone number, here's what's going to happen. First, you're committing, and we're more likely to follow through on something when we commit to doing this. And then the second thing is that we'll let you know, hey, we're in this together. We're going to encourage you along the way throughout the summer. We'll send you a couple text messages a week just to remind you, give you some other tips and resources. Hey, let's keep going in on this thing. Let's bless our neighbors this summer. And then we won't spam you. We'll stop after the summer. We just want to encourage you along the way. And here's why. Here's what we want to see more of throughout the series, is we want to see more in the summer. Some of you who don't know your neighbors, you get to build genuine friendships with your neighbors by inviting them over for cookouts and time-togethers. Others of you, you know your neighbors, you know their needs, and because you've been going through this and you say, yeah, I know how to serve my neighbor in a way that would make a difference, you're going to make a difference in your neighborhood because you've committed to going through this. And then others of you, you're going to have the great opportunity where you're going to be able to help one of your neighbors begin to follow Jesus because you've been putting into practice what we've been talking about throughout this series, perhaps by doing what we're going to talk about today, which is the second S. It's the fifth practice, the fifth way that we can love our neighbors. And this one's going to feel maybe the most unnatural or the most uncomfortable at first. And that is, hey, are we going to be ready to share our story with them, the way that Jesus has changed our life with them? And this can feel uncomfortable at first because we aren't sure how to do this. In fact, when I first became a follower of Jesus, in my church that I was a part of, there was a popular saying that was said with others. And it was said, here's how you can help others know the love of Jesus. And here's how you do it. You just preach the gospel or the good news of Jesus at all times, but only when necessary use words. Just do the first four things, but you don't really need to talk about it all that much. And I think here's why this was popular. Because it is uncomfortable and it's unnatural to talk about and to share, hey, how Jesus has changed our life. In fact, it can feel like we're forcing our faith on other people. But if we only focus on the first four of these practices and we exclude this, here's what happens. It's very incomplete. It's almost like if I were to tell you, hey, I'm a football fan, I love football, but I leave out the fact that I grew up in Illinois, so I'm a Bears fan. And I was leaving that out because I was afraid of responses like that. Like, hey, I'm just going to go ahead and just say, yeah, I just really, really like football, And so we might be tempted to say, I'm going to do the first BLES and then leave out the rest of it. But do you know what that makes us? A really nice person. A really good neighbor. And granted, we want you to be good neighbors. We want you to be a really nice person. I mean, we want you to treat others well. But if we miss out on this, we may miss out on the opportunity to really partner with God to help our neighbors follow Jesus. And so what I want us to do is I want us to look at a couple common reasons why we might feel uncomfortable at first when it comes to sharing our story. I want to help us push past those reasons. Then we're going to look at an example found in the Bible that is actually of an individual who was the least likely person to share a story about Jesus, but he did in a tremendously powerful way. In fact, we learned something from him that will help us be ready to share our story as a final way to love our neighbors. And so the first reason why we might be uncomfortable sharing our story is we might just be telling ourselves, hey, I don't have what it takes. Talking about my story with Jesus, I mean, that's really only for the super spiritual people, maybe the religious leaders. I don't have all the answers. I don't know all the ways to counteract all the questions, or win arguments. I just really don't have what it takes. But here's what I've learned over the years. I have never met a person who has said that they have all the answers to all the questions that our neighbors may have. In fact, I don't have all the answers to all the questions, and I just haven't met anyone who does. And what I've learned is it's never a good idea to pretend like you know all the answers to all the questions. And so when someone asks me a question that I don't know the answer to, that's the response. Hey, I don't know, but let's find out together. But the great news about sharing our story means we don't have to have all the answers, and we don't have to know everything. In fact, we won't even be wrong because it's our story to tell, and we know what is right about our story or not. So we have what it takes to actually share our own personal story. The second reason why we may have a hard time sharing our story is we just internally, we don't want to force our faith on other people. And good. We don't want you to force your faith on other people as well. In fact, if you're not a follower of Jesus, you definitely don't want people forcing your faith on others. And we don't want anyone forcing. I mean, in fact, we just don't see that as a way of loving other people. But here's what's great. If you're doing these other practices, if you are doing the other things that we've talked about throughout the series, my bet is that a friendship is forming. And trust is being built between the two of you. And as this relationship is growing, you're going to want to get to know about them, and they're going to want to get to know more about you, and they may ask you about your story. And that's the perfect time to share it. And you're not forcing, you're sharing when that happens. And the third reason why we may struggle with this is it can just feel awkward talking about our story and sharing our story. And it just is going to feel really uncomfortable at first when I do this. I mean, and is it worth it, with the awkwardness? And here's what I want to encourage you with. It may feel awkward at first to talk about our story, but that's not a reason to not talk about it. In fact, when we push past the awkwardness, it can get so much better because we have the opportunity to share the hope of Jesus with the other person. I mean, guys, you understand this. I mean, when we saw that girl and we wanted to ask her out, it was going to feel awkward at first asking her out. But then when she said yes, it was worth pushing past that awkwardness. Say, okay, let's go ahead and do that. And here's what's great. When we push past the awkwardness, when we talk about our story, it's going to become more natural and more comfortable the more and more that we do it. So it's worth getting ready to share our story. And in fact, a great example of someone sharing their story is found in the book of John. And John is actually a biography that John, who is one of Jesus' closest friends, wrote about Jesus. And in the book of John, in this chapter, he tells the story of Jesus traveling through Jerusalem. And on Jerusalem, Jesus meets a person who's very unlikely to be known as someone who shares her story. He comes across this man who is blind on the side of the street, and he's just begging for food, and he's begging for money. And so we read about this man. We realize that he was born blind, so he has never seen a human face. He's never seen a color. He's never seen a side of a building before. He's spent his entire life just begging for food, as that's the only way he can live. And so Jesus is walking through Jerusalem. This blind man, he hears that Jesus is near, and so he calls out to him for help. And then Jesus does something really odd, perhaps even offensive at first. Here's what Jesus does. Jesus spit on the ground, he made some mud with the saliva, and he put it on the man's eyes. This could be where we get the phrase, just rub some dirt in it. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam, and that word means sent. Now, this is incredible. I mean, imagine if this happened today, and imagine the outrage on social media. You can just see the headlines. Religious leader spits in the eyes of a blind man and tells him to go wash it off. There'd be so much outrage. Like, why is Jesus doing this? He does it to this man, and yet this man, he goes to this pool, and he does exactly what Jesus says. And here's what happened. The man went and washed, and he came home seeing. Imagine that. For the very first time in his life, we don't know how old he is, but we know all the years that he has lived. He has never seen anything, and now for the first time, he's walking back home, and he can see the faces of other people and just take it all in and take the beauty for the first time. He sees colors for the very first time, all the different shades of light just coming right through his eyes. He's looking at the buildings and the architecture and the plants, and he's just taking it all in. And he's walking and he's realizing, I've had to spend my life just begging and trying to receive food to survive. And now that I can see and I can see with my hands, now I can actually work and make a living for myself. I now have dignity to my life. I mean, he's realizing his life has changed. And not only that, others around him have noticed him. I mean, they've seen him on the side of the street. They've known him, like, that's a guy. And now he's walking down the street. He can see us. They see life change has just happened right before him. And so they ask him, hey, what happened? And here's what he said. The man they call Jesus made some mud and he put it on my eyes. He told me to go to Siloam and wash. So I went and I washed. And then I could see. And he just answers that question just so brilliantly and succinctly. Jesus said, do this, I did this, now I see. Here we go. And remember when we talked about Siloam, that word meant sent. I don't think it's a coincidence that Jesus sent him there, because now he's sent to share his story about Jesus. And people are hearing this like, whoa, they're just amazed. They can't believe, what happened before their eyes. But not everyone is so amazed. Because there's another group of people that see what's going on, and this is the group called the Pharisees, or the religious leaders of the day. And these religious leaders, they're jealous of Jesus. They want to end his growing movement because his movement means that their movement is shrinking, and they're losing power and influence. They don't like that, and so they want to poke holes in the character of Jesus so that they can stop his movement, and they think they see an opportunity. Because this day that Jesus healed this man who was blind, this day was called a Sabbath. And a Sabbath was a special day that God gave the people of Israel. And he said, hey, on the Sabbath, you are to keep it holy and rest from all work. A very good law. But the Pharisees took this law to a place that God never intended it to go. And they came up with these really extreme laws about working. In fact, one of them was related to healings. And they said, you cannot heal on a Sabbath unless if it is a life-saving event. And now, since this guy spent his entire life being blind, healing him was not a life-saving event. And so they said, Jesus, you worked on the Sabbath, you violated the Sabbath, which means you sinned. And so they think they have Jesus in a trap, and they just need to get this guy to say that that's what happened. And so they get this guy here, and they start asking him about his story, and they try to poke holes in the character of Jesus. They say this. They say, hey, give glory to God by telling the truth. They said, we know this man is a sinner. And so they're acknowledging that his story is real, but they want their version of the story. And they're trying to come up with these arguments against Jesus. So, for example, that they may today come to us and say, okay, if you've experienced this life change, what about these things? Like, well, how do you know God is real if you can't see him or touch him? Or how do you know God is real if there's so much suffering in this world? And they're coming at all these arguments, and they may even come across and feel so much smarter than us. And we're wondering again, do I have what it takes? I don't know, and we kind of freeze in the camera like that little boy, like apparently because I don't know how to answer that question. But this man who was born blind and who is healed, he just responds in a very brilliant way. And he just says, I'm not going to talk about the arguments. In fact, he responds this way. Whether he's a sinner or not, again, I don't know. I don't know all the answers to the questions. I don't know the answers to the arguments. I'm not going to win a theological debate with you, the religious Pharisees. I don't know if he's a sinner or not. But here's the one thing I know. I was blind, but now I see. And he just simply shared his story. This is what happened to me when I met Jesus. I don't know all of the things, but here's what I know. Man, I couldn't see today. I was begging to save my life. He did this to me, and now my life has changed, and I can go forth. And look at me now. I can see now. He had a story of life change that happened because of Jesus. And if you're a follower of Jesus, and I'm a follower of Jesus, we have something in common with this man. And what that thing in common is that we have a story of life change when we encounter Jesus. We have a story that is very much like his. The question is, hey, are we ready to share it? Do we know our story, and have we thought about our story in a way that we can share it succinctly? That when someone says, hey, why do you hope in Jesus? We don't go, oh, like as cute as that kid was, as great as he was. We don't go, oh, apparently. But we have a reason. and we know our reason, and we know our story, and we are ready to share it, and we are able to share it in a way that shows the hope that we have so that they can experience that hope as well. And so there is a way that we can know our story as succinctly as that man. And so there's actually a tool that we're going to walk through. It's called the 3-part story that helps us prepare a way that we could actually share our story in a compelling way that shares the hope that we have in Jesus. And the 3-part story is just based around that very simple statement that that man who was healed said. And it all comes down to, I was blind, but now I see. And in this simple statement, there are 3 parts of his story that he just clearly states. He says, that was his life before Jesus. But this was how he met Jesus, and now I see. That was when his life was since Jesus. And all of us who've made the decision to follow Jesus and have experienced this, we all have similar parts of the story. And when we acknowledge this, this helps us prepare our story that we can share with others. And so let's look at this. The first part of the story, we just ask ourselves a question. Hey, what was my life like before I met Jesus? And for the man who was blind, it was very clear. He's like, I was born blind. I could not see. That was what happened before I met Jesus. How about you? What was your life like before you met Jesus? For me, I was in high school. And when I was a high school student, I felt like I didn't measure up and I didn't fit in. I never felt like I was good enough. Like I never measured up academically. I didn't feel like I fit in with my friends. I didn't feel like I fit in my school. I was below average athletically. I was very scrawny. That didn't really change, but everything about me, I just felt like I didn't fit in. And then when it came to church, I didn't have a great experience in church. My family went to a more traditional church, and we're there. I didn't understand what was being talked about. I didn't understand the songs, and so I kind of thought that first hour was boring during service, and I really didn't like what happened afterwards when we would go to Sunday school. And I was in this Sunday school class all throughout childhood with older kids who would bully and pick on me throughout the whole time. And so for me, getting through that time was just something, hey, just gut through it so you can get home, work on some homework, and then go home and watch the Bears. Yes, that was what I had to look forward to. But that was my time before I met Jesus. And so what is that before you? What was your life like before you met Jesus? Now, some of you, when you look at your story and you think about before you met Jesus, some of you might say, well, I don't know if there's anything dramatic about my story. And I don't know if it's a good story, but here's the thing. Whether there's something dramatic about your story or not, it's your story. And God will use your story, whatever it was, as long as you honestly and authentically share your story. Some of you can relate to my story before I met Jesus. Guess what? There was nothing dramatic about that. Most high school students, many of them go through the exact same thing. But we want to acknowledge, hey, what was our life like before we met Jesus? And we just tell that part of our story. And then we move into the second part, which is how I met Jesus. Not how I met your mother, which is a great TV show and a conversation for another day, but this is how I met Jesus. How did you get to meet Jesus? For the man who was born blind, he made it very clear. Hey, Jesus came to me, he rubbed dirt in my eyes, and he told me to go wash. How did you meet Jesus? Did a parent or a family member raise you in a way that pointed you towards Jesus? Did you go through a difficult time or a difficult circumstance where you ended up searching for something and then you ended up finding Jesus that way? Did a friend invite you to an event where you ended up finding Jesus there? I mean, that's my story. I shared a couple weeks ago about a good friend of mine named Kurt. And Kurt came into my life in high school, and he did what we've been talking about throughout this series with me. And we began a friendship, and because of that, he invited me to his church and his student ministry at his church. And it was there when I went when I was about 15 years old, and I was just blown away. Because when I was there, I could understand what the student pastor was talking about, the music that was played. I was like, wow, I kind of like this music. But even more than that, there was other students from different high schools there, and because I just tended to feel like I never measured up or fit in, they let me feel welcome there. And they cared about me. And it was just kind of this really cool, welcoming experience where it was there that my heart just really began to open up to Jesus. And it was there that I understood that even though I felt like I didn't measure up, the truth was I don't. That we all fall short of God's standard called sin. But Jesus said, don't worry about that because I came to pay for your sin. And I came to offer you new life, that when you trust in me and receive my gift of new life, you'll become a child of God. And you don't have to worry about measuring up because you're loved and you are God's son. And so it was there that I made the decision, say, hey, I don't know everything, but I'm in. And I'm going to choose to follow Jesus right now. And so what is that for you? How did you meet Jesus? You identify that in your story, and then we move to the third part. And that is, hey, what has been my life since I've met Jesus? Since you've made the decision to follow Jesus, this is when we answer, here's what changed. And the man who was born blind, he said, here's what happened. I was healed. I can now see. How has Jesus changed your life? What is different? What is different about your relationships? How are you experiencing God moving you through the good times and the bad times? And I hope you picked up on that it's both through the good and the bad, because there is difficult circumstances. And when we share our story, it comes across very real and authentic when we share, hey, it's not a happily ever after, but God is with us when we go through trouble, because Jesus said, I'm going to give you peace even when the world gives you trouble. And so how has your life been changed since? For me, when I began to follow Jesus, I just experienced Jesus change my life. I went to high school and I realized, okay, I don't measure up, but I am loved. I was full of anxiety, but I began to experience his peace. I began to come into relationships that I only came into because of Jesus. I met my wife. I've had my kids. I get to be a part of this amazing church and have great friendships as a result of that. Jesus just radically just changed my life. But to be honest, there are moments that I still feel like I don't measure up, that I'm not quite enough. I'm not a good enough husband or a good enough dad or a good enough friend or a good enough pastor. And there's times where I feel like, I'm still not enough. And it's in those moments when I turn to Jesus and Jesus says, hey, Tyler, I've taken care of that. I've taken care of that. I said you're worth it because I gave my life for you. Just keep following me. And so we just begin to acknowledge, okay, this is the part of my story. How has my life changed since I met Jesus? And when you put this together, you have the opportunity to share these stories and to share the hope of Jesus with your neighbors. In fact, the other day, I was talking with someone who goes to the Ridge pretty regular. And he is committed to putting into practice what we're talking about throughout this series. And he's doing this at a local restaurant where he's been meeting the staff members on a regular basis there. He's had some friends come eat with him, and they were talking about faith, and the staff members overheard this. And over time, they began to ask him questions. Well, he asked them questions. He listened to them. He got to know them. He spent time with them. He's been praying for them. And then they asked him to share his story, and he shared his story with them. And they're like, wow. And he said, Tyler, here's what's really cool. They're asking questions now. They're seeking. They want to take steps. In fact, many of them have started checking out other church services and different things online to get answers to their questions. He said there's even one person who made the decision to follow Jesus. And because they followed Jesus, they actively got involved with another church, one of our local network church partners, because of where they live. And he said they're taking steps, and it's just so cool to see. And what I think could be even cooler is if you and I experience stories like this on a regular basis, because we are just committing together to blessing and loving our neighbors and just being willing and ready whenever we're asked to be able to share our story about the hope that we have in Jesus. And so, how do you get started? The first thing I want to encourage you to do is I want you to take some time to write out your story. And just to spend some time just writing out these answers to these questions. In fact, there's a resource on our webpage that will help you walk through this. And if you text in, you're going to get this texted to you over the next few days where you'll be able to write out your story. And here's why you want to write this out. Because when we're asked, we only have about a minute, 2 minutes max to be able to share it in a way where our neighbors will listen and pay attention. And when we give this in a way that we're ready, they'll be like, wow, this person really thought about this. This really matters to them. And so we want to write out our story. And then when we do this, I think God does something where he honors that, where he gives us opportunities to share it, which leads to the next thing. We want to ask God for an opportunity to share. And say, God, will you show me when is the right time to share my story? And the best time to share it is when someone that we are blessing asks us to share it. And then we're ready, and we share, and we just hope God will move throughout that time. In fact, we never know when this is going to happen. I had this happen the other day at the gym. A guy that I spent some time with, we bump into each other every now and then, we talk, we joke around. Somehow church came up in the conversation, and he asked me, hey, why do you go to church? And I had an opportunity to share my story, a little piece of it, and our conversations have taken a more significant turn because of that as we are going through this together. And so, as we begin to wrap up this series together, here's what I want for all of us. I want for us to commit online and in person just to say, you know what, I'm in on this. I want to share with others what has been shared with me. I want to bless my neighbors. I'm going to be in. And I'm going to see God move and God do this in me and through me, where I'm going to pray for my neighbors. I'm going to listen for them. I'm going to eat with them. I'm going to serve them. And then when the time is right, I'm going to share my story with them. And I'm just going to hope and pray that I would love them in a way that they would see how much they matter to God, that they would actually maybe make the decision to follow him. And so if you're with us in Greenfield on your seats, there was this card that was put on your seat that I hope you take with you. It actually walks us through and reminds us all of these different ways that we love our neighbor. There's a reminder on how to commit to being a part of this, and a reminder to text the word blessed to that phone number. If you're joining us online, you can actually go to the Ridge app and you can download this image on your phone. And here's what I want you to do with either this card or the image that you're going to download. I want you to put this where you're going to see this every day this summer. And when you see this, I want you to just ask yourself this simple question. Hey, who am I going to bless today? This day of the summer, who am I going to bless and which way am I going to bless them? Which of the 5 practices? And you can just use this as a prayer. God, who do you want me to bless today? And then when you do this, imagine what will happen. I mean, I said earlier that we've had about 340 people commit to doing this. Imagine if that number just keeps going up where everyone who's joining us is doing this. And if we all do this together this summer, here's what can happen. Our community can be transformed. Our state would be left in a different place. Our country would just be moved, because this is how change happens. It happens at one person at a time. And it happens one person at a time when all of us say, hey, you know what, I'm in. And I'm going to do this in a way where I'm going to love and I'm going to bless and commit my neighbors. It's simple, it's easy to do, but we have to do it. And we just have to say, I'm in on this. I'm going to love my neighbors this much that I'm going to go out of my comfort zone. I'm going to bless them. I'm not going to force faith on them. I'm just going to simply love them and show them how much they matter to God, and hope and pray that God will draw them to himself as I do this. So let's start this right now, wherever you are. Let's commit by praying together that we're going to do this. And that is, God, again, God, we aren't mad at the people who have done this for us. God, we're so grateful for the people that you've sent into our lives who have blessed us, who have prayed for us and eaten with us and shared their story with us and served us and just met our needs that ultimately pointed us to you, God. God, it changed our lives, where we can relate to that man who said, I was blind, but now I see. God, we have such a powerful story that you've given us because of that. God, we thank you for that person. And God, we pray that we can be that person for our neighbors. And so God, give us the wisdom and the courage to do this, to bless them in a way that would give your best to them, to show them how much they matter to you. And God, I pray that as we do this, you draw them closer to you. You draw them closer to you. God, you're the only one who can change their hearts. God, would you do it? And would you use us to bring the hope of your son, Jesus, to them? And it's in his name that we pray. Amen.
So this is it. This is our last call for us to commit to blessing our neighbors this summer. Text the word bless to 414-509-0339 to commit and get the resources for the summer. We want to hear from you and how you are using these 5 ways and if they've been helpful for you. Leave us some comments on your favorite social media channel. Make sure you tag The Ridge and follow us wherever you hang out online, and let's just stay connected. Heads up, next week is Father's Day. Our lead pastor, Mark, has a very special message for all the guys and the special ones in your lives. Bring someone with you. And remember, we are living out God's vision to bring the hope of Jesus into every home. Make it a great week.